I want to kind of go back to how you got involved with Zappos. First of all, being an early investor in it, and then eventually becoming the CEO of Zappos. What made you think that the internet was going to become a thing? Like back in, I mean, you're talking about 99, 2000. We didn't have what we have today. We don't have mobile apps where you can just swipe and something it shows up at your front door. We didn't have, all these big internet companies like Amazon, Zappos, like Facebook. You didn't have these companies. So what made you lean towards the idea that this might be something big as opposed to like, oh, it's just a fad, it's a bubble, it's not going to last?
Yeah, so I was always pretty entrepreneurial growing up, and so as a kid in middle school, and this was what year were you guys born?
I was born 90 or
93.
93.
Okay, so I was in middle school in 1985, and
Nice.
I specifically remember 85 because that's the year Back to the Future came out. Did you guys ever watch that?
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know. It was before Pretty Woman. So,
For sure.
And so in middle school, like I was just always trying out these random entrepreneurial things. And like I was on the swim team and I saw they sold baked potatoes. And so I researched how much would it cost to go buy potatoes and sell baked potatoes, which I think were, I don't know, maybe $2 at the time. And so one of the things that I got involved with was the mail order business, which this is all pre-internet. And so back in the day, literally you'd look on the back of magazines or catalogs and you'd order stuff and send in a
check.
paper check.
Yeah.
And then the normal time was 4 to 6 weeks later, they would send you back whatever you
Oh my God.
bought. Yeah, like this.
Oh my God.
What is it? 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks, and that was normal. Like literally, go look at the back of magazines and whatever mail order catalogs. That's the normal time frame that something gets sent back. And I remember as a kid, my best friend at the time, he had this book called Free Stuff for Kids, and it was a book that was maybe, I don't know, 100 or 200 pages, and everything in there was either free or up to $1 that you could order, and then a lot of them you'd have to include SASE, which was SASE, which stood for self-addressed stamped envelope. And so basically your max thing for quote-unquote free was you would send in $1 in a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I think stamps were 20 cents at a time or something. And so you might get something like I don't know, just these little random tchotchke things, and
Pet rock.
it could be a pet rock, or it could be a book of recipes, or I don't even remember, but stuff that kids might be interested in. And so at the time, my younger brother and I subscribed to this magazine called Boy's Life. I don't know if that still exists or not, but I remember at the back of the Boy's Life magazine, they would have these ads for get magic tricks or these novelty things and so on. So that was another mail order type of thing. And so I wrote a type letter to the editor of, or whoever the publisher of the book Free Stuff for Kids, because in the back of Boy's Life magazine, there was this company that sold button making machines, meaning like these buttons that with pins that you'd wear on your shirt or whatever. Not like buttons that had slogans,
right,
like for political campaigns or whatever. And so
vote for Pedro.
And yes, exactly. And so for each button, it would cost 25 cents to buy the outer plastic wrap and the metal stuff and so on to make the buttons, but then I had to spend like originally it was $50 for like a very difficult way to make the buttons that was very manual, and then I had a semi-automatic thing that I eventually bought for like $350. And so, but basically I was, and then my original thing, going back to the whole swim team thing, was I was like selling these buttons to people that wanted to support the swim team, but not that many people bought them. But then I wrote to the editors of this book, Free Stuff for Kids, and said, hey, for $1 in a self-addressed stamped envelope, people can send in a photo and then they can get a button made out of it. And this was pre-internet. There was no Google or anything. And so they thought I was a legitimate business and adult. And so,
Oh, damn. That's
and
crazy.
so, so 6 months later, I was in the book. And then one of the quote unquote tricks that I learned from reading articles and books on how to run a mail order business back in the 1980s was that the way you track the orders you get is that you just say it's the department. And so I said, if you want this thing, then mail it to Department FSFK, which stood for Free Stuff for Kids.
Yeah.
And then I could track what was actually, so that actually ended up being a completely free thing. And for the next, 5 years or so, brought in probably $200 or $300 a month, which was a lot of money for a kid in the 80s.
Definitely.
And then
For the 80s in general.
Middle school too.
and then I went to college and then passed it off to my next youngest brother, and then he went to middle school or high school, and then passed it off to the next brother. So it was kind of this
Almost creating generational wealth.
yeah.
The family. Middle school wealth.
So anyways,
So that got you basically thinking about the idea that, hey, here's something that I don't have to be person to person making business with, right?
So it was more that I knew the mail industry worked, which doesn't really, or mail order industry is, I think, what it was called. And then now fast forward to 1999, when the founder of Zappos, Nick, had this idea about selling shoes online, and his whole story was he tried to find a pair of shoes in a mall and couldn't find it, and went all over the place and couldn't find it. And he did some research, and he found that the fastest growing segment of the footwear industry, which was $40 billion a year in 1999,
Wow.
was by mail order, which was what I was just talking about.
Wow.
And that was 5% at the time, and it was growing. So 2 billion already. And then so we did a little research on our own and emailed it's very few customers, but emailed existing customers and asked how many of them had purchased shoes by mail order before. And it was 1 out of 3. And so then in our minds, if the mail order industry was already 5%, which was 2 billion of 40 billion, then 1 out of 3 implied that the opportunity was at least 6 billion. And that's where it seemed very logical that the world was going to shift from paper mail order catalogs to online, even though we were at the very beginning of online. So in our minds, here's a $6 billion opportunity. So super long-winded answer to your
That's
question.
a great answer though, because I got to learn about. I mean, I didn't completely forgot about mail order and how you used to
same
actually first it was mail order. When we grew up, it was more you saw a number on the screen on the TV, and then you would call to get your.
Oh, yeah.
That was the next evolution of it, and then the one after that would be, I guess, the internet.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Did you ever end up finding out what happened to that button making business? Did it end up going out of business?
It's still in the
Has it moved to the internet?
No, I think after my youngest brother went to college, then it probably shut down.